Hey guys, Tyler Mahoney here with Truman Lake Fishing Intel. I had a really cool opportunity to come down and meet one of the lake's honestly greatest fishermen here over the last, since it was before lake, Darrell Reach. Darrell, it's really great to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Appreciate you making some time for us. And Darrell, I wanted to come down and meet him because there's a really special story. Darrell's been fishing this lake for a long time, and before we get into that story, Darrell, I kind of want you to introduce yourself a little bit more about your background on the lake from way back when. You fished it before it was even a lake.
Yep, my regular fishing partner, John Bennett, and I both grew up at Osceola, Missouri on the upper end of the Osage River. And you know, we grew up there and were fishing the river and the creeks up there prior to the lake coming in. So there's lots of places we go fish now where we tell stories about, you know, right over there where it's about 10 feet deep, we used to camp, you know, and come camp and spend the night as kids, and used to canoe this creek, or we used to wade the creek. That was all before the lake came in. I think the lake filled up around 80 or 81 approximately. And that was about the time John and I both were graduating high school. And as a matter of fact, my senior year, I was lucky to graduate because I missed so much school going fishing. And that's not a joke.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just loved it. There was a marina at Osceola. The marina that's Osage Bluff down here was originally at Osceola, Missouri.
Okay.
And it was up there a couple of years, and then they got the lease at Osage Bluff, and we cut the marina loose and floated it down to where it is now.
Wow.
Yeah, it took us, I believe, 4 days.
Okay, I was gonna say that had to be quite a process.
4 days, we just, however far we got each day, we'd pull over and kind of anchor it or tie it up at night and spend the night on it and get up and start the next day.
That's really...
And we had a bunch of rental boats tied to it and a couple of houseboats, and that's just how we pushed it down that entire distance all the way to Osage Bluff.
That is one thing that I wish, you know, cameras and video cameras were around to see that kind of thing, because that you just don't see that or hear that. That's wild. That's really cool.
There was a local paper, the St. Clair County Courier, that covered the story and had some photos and stuff of it in the paper back then, but that was around, you know, approximately 1982, I think.
Wow, that's really cool. So since then, John and Darrell both have been a force on the lake. You've won 2 of the Joe Bass tournaments this year, is that correct?
Correct.
And then fill me in a little bit more. I mean, some of the other big events that you guys won. You've won a lot of the Joe Bass stuff. What other things have you guys won or
We've been very fortunate on the lake. I never like talking a lot about it. I don't like coming across like we're bragging, but you know, we've won 5 or 6 boats on the lake. We've won Joe Bass and Anglers in Action Championships on back-to-back weekends. That's something we're pretty proud of. 2 weekends in a row, both of them 2-day tournaments, going out of Bucksaw, both of them did. Won a couple of 4-wheelers. You know, we've won the Shriners, I think, 3 times, second a couple of times. We've been very fortunate at what we do, and I'll be honest with you, we're pretty good on Truman, but you get me off Truman, I'm not so good. I'm just being honest. I'm not very good at fishing deep water. You know, I'm not clear water. I grew up fishing shallow, dirty water, and got trained by one of the greatest fishermen I've ever known on the lake, and his name was Jim Rush. Okay. And he literally taught me everything I know about tournament fishing. There's a big difference between just fishing and tournament fishing, and the biggest thing he taught us was most fishermen can catch fish. The divider is finding fish. And he was the greatest at finding fish of everybody I've fished with on the lake. I grew up learning a lot of, you know, I was lucky I got to fish with Jim Rush, Al Dunning, Fred Barracks. These were all people that were really good on the lake over the years, and I learned a lot of stuff from all those guys. Yeah, so interesting little question I was just thinking of. When the lake filled up for the first time, what was it fishing like back then compared to now? Is it differed a whole lot? It's tremendously different. The creeks that John and I like to fish, that fishing has almost come to an end because they've silted in so badly since, you know, the lake filling up in, you know, the early 80s. Back then, it was like fishing a flooded forest. If you look back at that timber and up in that campground, that's what it was like fishing the lake. It was just unbelievable, and the numbers of fish were just outrageous. Back then, it really wasn't a matter if you could find the number of fish, because it wasn't that hard. It was if you could actually get them in the boat. You know, the equipment wasn't as good, line wasn't as good, rod, you know, everything's improved so much, but the cover was just so incredible.
I remember seeing a photo of you guys, exactly what you described, where it looked like you were just in a forest. And I think it was on one of Peyton's That's a Good Fish videos, and it was just one of those classic photos, and I'm sure it was in the 80s, but it was a pure flooded forest. So that's wild to envision, because you don't really see that now.
And here's another thing, like when we first started, it dates us on how old we are, because when we first started, flipping wasn't even a thing. That just came about, you know, probably mid-80s. The name escapes me now, that who kind of put it on the map and made it famous. But back then, you know, we never heard of, like, you know, flipping a bait. We were trying to cast, and we also grew up using mostly 6-foot rods for almost everything, because 5.5 foot and 6 foot, because there was just so much cover. You really needed a short rod to be able to cast.
Really?
Yeah, that's just how much different it was.
Wow. So that's really cool and interesting to hear. It just kind of goes to show, like we talked about, the experience on the lake that Darrell and John have, which brings me to why I wanted to come down and talk to Darrell, because there was a really a special day that I think for you is special as well. I don't come from a tournament fishing background. I watch it and kind of understand it, but this really kind of hit home for me when I heard the story. Darrell was fishing the BFL here a few weeks back and had a co-angler that was really catching the fish. And Darrell did something that I thought just showed some true sportsmanship that I think a lot of people need to hear. Just a really cool story, and hopefully, you know, folks can kind of learn to do something similar. And Darrell, I just kind of wanted you to walk me through that day and what was going on, what was happening, what ultimately made you decide what you did. So,
well, first and foremost, Chris Bunk was just an excellent bass fisher. Okay, I didn't like help Chris win or have to do anything special for him. He is just an excellent bass fisher. Okay, and he had a great system in place that he does as a co-angler, and it's one of those things you read about a lot, but a lot of guys just don't really do it. And you should. You're just far better off always, in my opinion, the vast majority of the time, trying to do something different than what your angler in the front of the boat's doing. And just real quick, in regard to that, I threw a chatterbait most of the day, and I was kind of hard-headed about it. I thought I was going to be able to catch him throwing a moving bait and a chatterbait, and he ended up fishing a small profile jig behind me, and, you know, caught his fish doing that. And it was just an excellent, you know, system that he had. And you always read about it, like, oh, as a co-angler, here's what you do, and that's exactly what he did, and he really executed it well. But you know, I've taken a lot of grief over that, because anytime a boater gets outfished by his non-boater, you know, you just like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. Well, it happened, and you know, and I was happy with it. And it was just such a great day, and he was such a great guy. We left out of here boat 16, I think, that morning, and we went to a main lake point. And let me give you another example of sportsmanship. A guy that I fish against all the time, John Cruson, actually kind of helped get me dialed into this point, which he didn't have to do. We're competitors. We're friends through fishing, but you know, a lot of, you know, it's different as far as like helping each other. But he really helped me and kind of dialed me into this point. And I had told him that, well, if I get an early up number, we'll probably stop there before we make a long run. And so we went to this point, and luckily, being boat 16, we got there first. And we are setting the boat down and getting up to get our rods and trolling motor down, and Chris is putting the running light down for me. And the next thing I know, a boat comes flying in to our left and is angling in, and he stops, and he's getting his stuff ready to fish, and is gonna cut, I mean, right in front of us. And I'm getting my stuff, and I'm kind of watching this, you know, and he keeps coming up, and now we're within, you know, talking distance. And I just, you know, I had to say something, and I said, are you really going to cut right in front of us? And the guy looks at me and goes, well, you know, I thought you were going the other way. And I said, well, you know, my boat's been pointed this way the entire time. I said, you know, we're up getting ready to fish, and this guy's getting ready to make a cast and right in front of us. And I said, we've been heading this way the whole time. And he goes, oh, he goes, well, what boat number are you? And this just kind of took me by surprise because I've never had anybody ask me that. And I'm like, what's that got to do with anything? And I said, well, we're boat 16. He goes, well, we're boat 10. And it's as if he meant that him having the earlier boat number means he gets the spot, even though we were there first. And I just really couldn't believe it. And I go, well, what's your boat number have to do with anything? And the guy finally then catches on and puts his rod down and turns the boat around and goes, have a nice day. And I said, well, you know, we will. And Chris is in the back of the boat and he says, I can't believe that just happened. He goes, I've never seen something like that. And I said, well, I haven't either, to be honest, where somebody wants to reference their boat number. So that's a prime example of what not to do. You know, I know I'm kind of joking about it, but guys, if somebody, and there's no such thing as your spot, that's something else you need to know. There's not my spot. You know, it's fishing areas, and if somebody beats you there, they beat you there, and you just have to deal with it. You don't try to cut in front of them about it. And so we, you know, that happened, and so we start fishing out on this point, and I'm telling you, it was loaded with fish, but they were all shorts. And we caught we stayed there about an hour and caught probably 20 fish, and Chris caught 2 keepers there. And again, Chris was making sure he did something different. The whole time I'm throwing a brush hog. All right. Chris caught one of them on a chatterbait, and then caught one on a jig. And we fished that for about an hour, and I finally said, you know, Chris, and I'd already talked to him the night before, I said, you know, I think we can make about a 45-minute boat ride and have a chance that one or both of us might win. I said, are you okay with making a ride like that? And he said, oh yeah. So we gave that point about an hour, and I said, okay, let's go. And another reason we decided to go is I don't like fishing in a crowd. I don't. And also, while we were on the point, 2 other boats came in, and one pulled up in front of us on the left and one pulled up in front of us on the right. Kept a respectable distance, but now we're kind of pinned. So like if we wanted to venture down either side of the point, you know, we really didn't have any options. So I said, let's go. So we battened everything down, and we made a 45-minute boat ride up to, and I'll tell you, we're up in the Osceola Roscoe area. That's where John and I grew up. The lake's up high enough that you can, at that time, that you could get in some creeks. And we get in there, and I catch 2 fish on a chatterbait throughout the day, tournament time while we're fishing. I had a 4-pounder and a 3-pounder. And Chris catches 3 more fish fishing that jig. And it's a small profile jig, again, not like a big half-ounce jig. It was probably on a little bit smaller than the 3/8. I think it was a crocodigator jig. Okay. Fishing a small trailer on it, and so now he's got his limit behind me. Okay. And we're fishing, and I'm just not. At one point in time, I get my flipping stick out because, you know, I'm not a total dummy. I'm like, you know, Chris is getting more bites than I am with that jig. But it was hard-headed, and I'm like, I'm going to keep throwing my chatterbait. And towards the end of the day now, we've probably got about 2 hours left to fish. And Chris has got a solid limit. I've just got 2. I lost another fish on a chatterbait, which also made me keep thinking I'm going to get my bites and eventually on the chatterbait. Well, about 2 hours to go, it kind of hits me. It's like, you know, the bite kind of slowed down even. And I'm like, I looked at Chris and I said, Chris, I said, if I catch a 4-pounder right now, it's not really going to do me much good. Now, fishing was way tougher than what I thought, and another 4-pounder, I would have got a check, but I'm really not interested in that. I want to win. And I just didn't think I was going to win at that point. But I really thought Chris had a chance to win on the co-angler side. And I just looked at him and said, buddy, if I catch a 4-pounder, it's just not going to help me that much. And I said, but if you do, I think you can win. And I essentially chose, I just set my rod down, and I quit fishing, and I just ran the boat while Chris fished. And we did that for probably a half hour, and the next thing you know, Chris flips that jig over against a rock bank and catches a 4-pound bass.
Wow.
And that let him call out a 2-pounder. Okay, and he ended up winning by a pound, I think, on the non-boater side. So that fish right there won it.
Right.
And I'm not making this up. When we netted that fish, when I netted it for him, I told him, I said, Chris, I think you just won. And you know, awesome. Chris was super excited. And again, let me make it clear, he's an excellent fisherman.
Yep.
This wasn't some kind of fluke or the first time a guy. I believe that's the 3rd time Chris has won the non-boater side of a BFL.
Yep.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I think that's the 3rd time. So it just tells you what a quality fisherman he is. And he was just enjoyable to fish with all day. He, you know, man, if he got hung up, which he seldom did, he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, you know, if you're not getting hung up sometimes, you're not putting the bait where you need to put it.
Right.
You know, it's not like, and I told him this. I said, look, if you start hanging up so much it's a nuisance, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I just straightforward about it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't at all. He was just an excellent fisherman. He had a great system. We put that 4-pounder in the boat, and at that point, we still had time to fish. I could have still kept fishing, you know, but at that point, we had at least a 45-minute boat ride, and that's under perfect conditions. So we actually left with about an hour and a half to get back in because I wanted to make sure I got Chris back. That way, if you have a prop problem, you have time to change it. It also allows you time to get down more near the main lake area if you have a boat problem, because when you're that far up the Osage, you are not going to have any help. So we actually, you know, gave up some fishing time just to make sure we could get back in, and that allowed me to drive the boat a little slower, a little more of a leisurely type ride back in, as opposed to wide open the whole way. And sure enough, we get back, and not only does Chris win the non-boater side, but his weight was actually higher than the boater side as well. So it was just a great day, and I enjoyed it. And I get it, guys keep ribbing me about it and stuff, you know, and I even had to apologize to John on Sunday because I was kind of in a bad mood. And I just wasn't myself, and I said, Dad, it's just getting under my skin a little bit. But it ended up turning out pretty well because we won the next day.
That's what I was gonna say. I think you appeased the fishing gods, got some good karma, and you know. So first of all, I just want to ask you, when he went to the scales and he comes out with the winning weight, I mean, that had to be a pretty awesome feeling. Kind of having the premonition that it was gonna happen. I mean, what was your immediate thought, just reaction?
It really was. It was awesome because there's. Again, I always like to watch my words because I don't ever want to seem conceited or you know, come across like one of those guys. But I think it was easier for me to enjoy that and to let that happen for him because John and I have had so much success on the lake. I just wasn't. The switch didn't go on for me to try to, like, you know what, I'm going to make sure he doesn't catch another fish behind me. You know, and I don't mean like cheating wise, but you know, just making it harder and just flip every bush 3 times before he gets to it. That switch didn't click. I'm just like, I want him to do well. And he deserved it. He was, and I'm going to tell you again, there's a guy that the only reason he's not fishing the pro side is because at the moment he doesn't have the boat. He's more than qualified. Okay. And it just was super enjoyable for me to, you know, to in some way help him have such a great day. And I believe he told me that was the best day he's ever had on Truman.
Wow. Well, and that's when I kind of heard through the grapevine a little bit of the story. I mean, that's what really resonated with me, even as someone who's not a tournament angler but kind of follows it. I just thought that was really cool and a really special thing, and I'm sure, like you just said, very special for you and obviously for Chris taking home the victory. But like you said, the very next day you're out on the water again competing in the Joe Bass event with over 130 boats. I mean, and you win the thing with 22 pounds. I mean, you left the rest of the field in the dust. So I'm just kind of curious, you know, what from day to day, what kind of adjustments you guys made?
John and I have a very special system in the boat. We do something that we don't see a lot of other people do. And if you watch a lot of buddy tournaments, and to be honest with you, this is another reason I think that with Chris catching fish behind me, it didn't bother me because I'm used to it. Okay? And here's what I mean by that. When John and I fish, any given tournament, John might kick my butt all day and I might only catch 2, but maybe one of those is our biggest
Yep.
fish.
Yep.
Or it can be vice versa, to where I kick John's butt all day, but then he catches, you know, 1 or 2 key fish behind me, because it's a team event. We're not competing against each other, and we never fall into that, well, John's, you know, catching every fish on a jig and I'm only getting one as a bite every now and then on a spinnerbait. So we always believe there's more than one bait that the fish are going to hit, and there's liable to be fish that you fish by.
Sure.
And typically it's me up front throwing a moving bait and John behind me fishing every other possible thing you can think that might catch a fish. And that's what works for us.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's just been countless times, you know, I'll spend the whole day up front spinnerbait and then I might catch 2 and John has caught 4 or 5 behind me, but the combination of those fish is what wins it.
Yep.
And what I'm getting at is there's almost never a time you'll see both of us up front flipping a jig, or both of us throwing a spinnerbait, or both of us throwing a, you know, square bill. We will almost 99% of the time make certain we're throwing different baits.
Yeah.
And you know, that's just what works for us, and we believe it's more efficient and is going to give you more opportunities to catch fish.
It makes perfect common sense.
So that's another reason, like I say, it just, you know, it just seemed like a normal day. Chris is, you know, catching them, and so the next day we made a little change because we went a little further. Went to a different creek, and the water was a little dingier. Okay, so on Sunday, and they bit my chatterbait better. Okay, is one thing that changed. I got a lot more bites on the chatterbait. We had 2 6.5-pound bass that day.
Wow.
And I caught one of those on a chatterbait, okay, moving bait, and here's John behind me. Towards the end of the day, he flips over by a flooded bush with a jig and catches another 6.5.
Wow.
And I had just fished that bush with a moving bait, with a chatterbait. And so if we both would have been doing the same thing, we probably wouldn't have caught.
Right.
And that's just our system.
Yep.
We always do that. And they just bit a little better for us. It was a different creek, and the second day, you know, I don't know if something else changed, but they bit the moving bait better for me on Sunday than they did Saturday in the and again, see, that was a mistake I made. If I had really was going to go all out and try to win on the BFL, I should have changed and flipped, because it was clear they were biting it better, but I just didn't.
Well, that weekend was really interesting. You guys had a 22-pound sack on Sunday, but even the BFL, I mean, it was a lot of 10 to 13-pound bags, and Joe Bass the next day was 11 to 14, and there was no in between. So it was still pretty tough on Sunday, but you guys cracked the code.
Yeah, but there were some bigger bags on Sunday too. There was, you know, the Jelinek had 19 pounds, almost 20, I think, for second. They had a really great bag of fish. The Thomas brothers had 17 or 18 pounds. They're always tough on the lake. I think what was the biggest advantage for us was we found some shallow fish, and I think the majority of the field was fishing current points, because typically under those circumstances we would normally get our tails kicked by those guys fishing those current points, and for whatever reason the fish just didn't set up on them as good as they normally do. And the guys that really do that a lot, that typically would beat us in those circumstances, the fish just weren't there like they normally were on the current spots. But the second day, I think the weights went up, and there's just a lot of really good fishermen on this lake that fish the Joe Bass. And anytime we win one, we feel lucky, because there's just a lot of good fishermen.
It's pretty impressive, and it's just really cool to see and get to learn some from you. We are sitting here at Long Shoal Marina. It is Saturday, and the Missouri Solo Bass Solo Pro is going out of Long Shoal here tomorrow. We just had a bunch of rain. The lake is on the rise. It was finally coming back down to normal. It was about 706.5 roughly yesterday, but it's already up over 707. Who knows what it's going to be by tomorrow. I'm just kind of curious, what are your expectations for tomorrow?
Well, what we love to do first and foremost is out the window, because we got so much rain that the backs of the bigger creeks that we like to fish are just mud. And there's more rain coming. And you know, as you can see back here, the lake floods so much, it takes it, you got to have a good 3 to 4 feet to get up in the bushes.
Right.
And
bass blow up right there.
and so it's not going to be up in the bushes yet, but the water is on the rise, so there ought to be some shallow fish caught. And if it's cloudy and rainy tomorrow, there ought to be some good topwater fishing, because the water's coming up. Those fish ought to want to move up some, and I would think, you know, topwater ought to be a really good chance tomorrow. Main Lake, you know, down here where it's still clean, beautiful water right now.
Sure.
But they're still calling for more rain tonight, and you know, throughout the week. So I would believe the lake's going to be continuing to come up for a few days.
Well, we're going to be there to cover the weigh-in and see how it all shakes out. Darrell, did you have any sponsors or any particular products you like to use that you wanted to talk about while we were here chatting?
Just real quick, while we're here, I always like to, you know, mention Bass, you know, Bass Pro Shops. They've taken care of me for a long time. Been on the pro staff at the Olathe, Kansas store. You know, if it's all my rods and reels I use are Bass Pro. It's just a good, you know, all their stuff's good quality equipment. And Camus Boats and Boatworks. Let me tell you something, those tournaments we've won, and it's been this way for the last few years, and it's with multiple boat manufacturers. And let me tell you guys, if you're out to buy a new boat, you really need to go buy Boatworks. They've got a big selection, and they support the tournament anglers, okay? You know, they have their own bonus program. One of the tournaments John and I won, we used my Camus. We got a $7,000 bonus from Camus, and then another $1,000 from Boatworks. Wow. So when you're out there looking for a boat, always check out the dealers. I mean, you can buy a boat anywhere, but you want good dealer support, and you're going to get that from Boatworks. The other tournament we won, John, we used his Nitro, and we won a $7,000 bonus from Nitro. So you really want to follow the boat companies and their bonus programs, because they can turn just an average buddy tournament win into a really significant win when you add that bonus money on top. And then the other thing, I'd like to mention some lifelong friends. I told you Jim Rush had taught me how to fish, and they do a lot to help me with my fishing. They give me a place to store my boat and to stay when I come down to the lake, and that's the Jim Rush Auto Mall in Bolivar, Missouri. Anybody looking for a good tow vehicle, it's a great place to go. They can get you some really great prices on pre-owned, like rental cars that have very low miles. It's where I got my truck that I pull with, and you know, I think it's just a smarter thing to do. A lot of people than buying a brand new one off the lot. You can go buy one with slightly used, and they got a great selection. And if there's something special you're looking for, you can just let them know, and they'll try to find it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you making some time to chat. I was really just excited to get to hear more about that story in the BFL, and wish you the best of luck tomorrow in the Solo Pro, and we'll be seeing you around all summer.
All right.
So thanks a bunch, Darrell.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great chatting with you. Guys, thanks a bunch for watching. Check out TrumanLakeFishingIntel.com, and we'll catch you on the next one.